I think typically when people get into something, they're not going to know that they're doing it or they're going to be doing it for that long. So I think if you ask any green founder who's just jumping in and you ask them about their plan and say, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to be X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, actually, you'll most likely be at the point that you think you currently are in about 5 years. So yeah, I think it's interesting. When I first started MOONHUB, what I found was I always thought maybe for the first few years that I was a few steps ahead of where I actually was. And I think that I consistently chased this, right, well, if I'm not actually there, if I'm 2 steps behind, I need to at least get there first, then I'll reassess. But when I get there, I realize that this constant 2-step behind lag is always there. And as a founder, you'll realize the mission isn't complete, you're not done. And for me, I'm not sure if the word perfectionist works well, but I definitely need to see things through to the end at least. And I need to be somewhat, not necessarily a perfectionist, but a completionist. And I think that because of that, the natural cycle of running a company, it goes through its ebbs and flows. And we've kind of caught a bit of a spark now, and it gives you a renewed energy, even if you're already 8 years into it as well. So finding something that you can dedicate 8 years to is by finding something that makes you excited, at least for the first year. And then if it's going well, and even if it's not, if you're still feeling very passionate about it, that will carry you through and keep you going. Because no one goes into something saying, okay, here's my 10-year plan. Some people do, but I think it's, if you think as you plan your first 10 years, you're going to end up taking 20. So might as well plan the first few.
I like that. What are the signals that something is going well, that something needs to be pivoted, or something should be left behind, right? So talking about committing to something long enough to complete it, seeing it through to the end. How do you know what the end is? Obviously, if you're successful, quote unquote, in whatever that means for you, so in a business, you've sold it or IPO'd or whatever, that's a pretty clear line of success. But what if you, I don't know, do an acqui-hire or you quit and it doesn't work or whatever? Like, how do you know when the end is?
It's a really good question. One I need to be careful answering because my investors are all like, he's 8 years into this, so we need to make sure he's not feeling too tired. I'm good, don't worry. On a serious note, I think for me, well, for everybody, success is very different, right? So somebody might want to be able to buy their first house because of what they're doing. Some people might say, actually, I want to leave a legacy of something that I've done. And because of that, them having something to their name that they put out there, like a product into the world that people use, is their definition of success. Then for a lot of people, specifically, of course, VCs and VC-backed companies, it's a company that's acquired or IPOs or goes to the moon as a unicorn. For me, my goalposts for success have shifted a fair bit, right? So we've got, I think, nearly 1,000% in growth in user traffic this year. I know these numbers sound great if they're like 1 to 10, right, people, but I can assure you ours are a lot higher than that. And for me, when I see a lot of user traffic that I'm seeing coming through, I'm like, okay, I always knew get here, that now being here, this feels quite established. It feels really good.
Is it different to what you expected it to feel like?
Yes, because the job's not done. So when you get to that level, you're like, oh, cool, it's established, people are using it. And you're like, oh, no, actually the job isn't finished. So because of that, you have this sense of, okay, I'm grateful, but also there's a lot more work to do. And you get better at learning how to do that sustainably. And you get better at knowing that, okay, you can consistently shift the goalposts and had your minimum takeaway that you're happy with. And going forward, it's just going to be, okay, what am I, as you continue to grow, there may be a point in time where the company doesn't need you as the founder anymore, right? You are the crazy person in the garage who was coming up with the idea, and now the company is actually growing wings. At some point, they might say, we appreciate the wacky creativity and all of that, but actually it might be time for you to take a little bit of a step back. And I think a lot of founders need to recognize that at some point too. Again, to my investors on my board, I'm not soft launching my resignation.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. But no, it's definitely been interesting. I've achieved things that will stay with me for life, and I'm really grateful. Communities along the way, being a Google-backed founder, being kind of sort of in parts backed by Meta, being somebody who's VC-backed, and also being somebody who's been able to push a product to thousands and thousands of people. For me, are all achievements that no one can take away. And as I grow, whatever next phase of life that looks like, yeah, that will stay with me. So I'm happy with that.
There's a couple of interesting things to know. I think you told me you had ADHD, but I didn't know the neurodiversity / non-neurotypicalism that is your life. I didn't know those things. Have you felt those things have held you back in any way? Because you've immediately framed them really powerfully as actually helpful in certain ways. Even, not being very coordinated. Well, you're doing what you're doing now because you were pushed in a certain direction because maybe other things didn't work, and it's still framed kind of positively. How has that been how has that interplayed in your life?
It's a really good question. When you're like thrust into a system that you immediately is like, or even you immediately get told is not for you, my personality is immediately one that I think other people strive to be accepted by the system, and I'm just like, all right, peace. I'll find my own way, like without even blinking. Kind of like an example on the playground. If you have a kid who, back in the day when they played football, was like, you can't play, it's my ball, and I would just go home and bring my own ball and then make up my own game the next day. That's the kind of kid I was, and then have people gravitate towards my game instead. So for me, I think it actually helped me find my own path a lot easier, and it also gives me a lot more confidence in my conviction in things. If people are saying there's only one way to do it and I'm finding that way a bit too difficult, I'm like, right, there's definitely not just one way to do it. There'll be several ways to do it. It's just if you're, say, for example, neurotypical, and it's not just ADHD, I won't go to anything else, but if your way of processing information is different, you can choose to really confine the way that you think and potentially limit maybe 70% of like your thinking power and going in that direction. Or you can choose to go with the flow of how your brain and your thought processes work, and use that to basically come up with really creative ideas, juggle many things at once, process information really, really quickly and make that into sort of an asset for you. School doesn't encourage that much at all.
No.
Within the UK either.
You know what? So the reason I asked this question, I think this is so powerful. In one of my early conversations on this show, I brought on someone who does a lot of speaking around neurodiversity. And he just said this one very clear line that has just stuck with me ever since, which is that there is no such thing as neurotypical. Everyone's brain operates however that brain needs to operate and learns to operate in the patterns and the neural pathways that it needs. So there's no such thing as typical. There is only a diversity of brains. The reason we have what we call typical is what you just said, is someone told us the way it should work.
Yeah.
And the powerful thing about the time we're living in now is we are noticing, more people are noticing that they have the freedom to choose how their brain should work. So you're only working against the way things should be if there is a way things should be.
Yeah.
And to adopt this mindset that it sounds like you adopted naturally, very quickly, very early on, relatively very early on in life, of I'm going to go my way, not the way, is so powerful because there is no the way.
Yeah.
Could you describe a time or a story where you felt really lost? You were like, am I doing the right thing? Is this going right? Is this meant to be?
To any founder or anyone doing anything in general, if you're not feeling that at least maybe once or twice a week, I don't think maybe you're not doing something as bold as you think you are. And that's not in a mean way. I think most people feel like that. I've given advice to people who are friends from their walks in the life from music to business to even philanthropy, and I've always said it's going to feel like you're swimming in air for the first bit. You're not going to feel any traction. Like you're going to be doing all the motions, and you're going to feel like you've got absolutely nothing. Like it's all in your head. It's not translating into reality just yet. But then you get that first nudge that you move forward. You're like, oh, like you've had the right conversation with one person who's validated that actually, yeah, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, it's great. But you won't feel that again for another long while. And then serendipity and all these wonderful things happen. Then all of a sudden, you're being put into these conversations with people and they're treating what you're trying to build or where you're trying to go as like already there. And in your mind, you might be thinking, that's where I think imposter syndrome comes from. People are like, actually, no, I'm only kind of getting there. I think a lot of people juggle that because, often at times on their journey, they really want to get to this place that they can envision. And then when they finally get there, they don't feel prepared enough. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but yeah, several times. You feel that a lot. I'm running a VR trading company, right? I think over the last 8 years, the amount of times I've heard the death of VR, my goodness, I think it's interesting. And then Apple will release the Vision Pro. And then all of a sudden I'm having VCs saying, Danny, I really want to talk to you about this Vision Pro. It seems like VR is here to stay. And it's like, I'm not going to listen to what you're saying because next year something else is going to be a massive hype bubble. So I think believe in what you're doing. Give yourself sort of a set, firm timeline. But if you really believe in what you're doing, you're going to feel times of feeling despondent, whether or not you should keep going. But then also think about where you've come from. If you've gone 2 years and you've seen zero progress, I'm talking about on paper, you can't even say that you have a tangible thing yet. I can't advise you on what to do. But if you can look year on year and say, actually, I've made progress. It's not been maybe where I thought I'd go, but you've actually gone forward. You're making progress. And at some point, you might actually snap and go on that massive trajectory very quickly, which happens to a lot of people. They'll grind away for like 5 or 6 years. And then the 7th year, that's where everyone hears the, I think there's like a JME lyric, which is like, took 10 years to become an overnight success. Yeah. Like, it's, people don't see those 10 years. And then when they finally see you everywhere, it's like, oh, well, they must have had one right conversation. You laugh. You're like, if only you knew like the 3 a.m. starts, 3 a.m. finishes, sometimes the 3 a.m. finishes and the 3:30 a.m. starts in the same day. You don't have the energy to tell them that because you know internally what it took to get there. But during that time, you always have times of feeling lost, whether or not you should keep going. And I can't even remember which founder this was. It was one of the logistics companies which deliver goods. I'm not going to say the names just in case I'm wrong on one of them, but it's a big one, and they were like down to their last payroll. I don't think they could make payroll the next month, and the founder took the cash, and you can Google this and confirm in the comments which company this was. The founder took the cash to Vegas, put it all on black or red or something, and then just like won 3 months of runway. Don't do this. I don't think it is. I don't think it's legal. But at that point, like that person must have also been thinking, is it worth it? Like he's probably got equity investment that if he goes under, it's bad, but it is what it is. Whereas this person believed in what they were doing so much. Again, please don't do this. This is not financial advice. This is not like business advice.
I may remember to edit that on the screen.
Yeah, please put that on the screen. But it really depends. And some people, when they're really like down here, I call it the valley of despair, they can either choose to stay there, or the way I like to think of it is, okay, if you're going to go out, try at least go out here so that you have fond memories and you're not stuck here. Because at least if you're up here and you choose to like call it quits, you're not stuck down here in this rut and without a vehicle to pull you out, right? If you stop here and decide to try and apply for jobs and stuff, and you're going to start applying from down here mentally, you don't want to do that. So I always feel like if I'm in a valley, I might as well like push forward to try and get back to the top of the hill and then see how I feel.
And then I'll make the bigger decisions.
Yes.
I've got a whole bunch of rules for my life. And one of them is don't make important decisions in an unhelpful state.
Yes.
If your state of mind is already got you on the back foot, everything else is a trickle-down effect from there. If I am so confident that everything is going terribly and I decide, should I sell my house and quit my job and all these other things, all in that frame of mind, just sleep and see what you feel, how you feel when you wake up in the morning.
Yep.
Makes a huge difference.
Eat, sleep. Go for a walk as well. There's rest. Yeah. There's a oh my goodness, there's a Latin phrase. I can't remember it now. Again, to everyone listening, Google it, but it's kind of like thinking as walking, right? When you go for a walk, I think ancient philosophers used to walk a lot because the act of walking often at times helps you clear your mind and also give you more perspective on things. Like when you get out of the house, when you walk around, you're like, okay, I think they say touch grass nowadays, but you're outside, you're walking around, you're actually realizing that, is it really that deep? Like there are people, millions of people living around me, living their lives, and I'm going through my own journey right now, but to walk and think and to re-perspectivize, if that's a word, things often helps me as well. It kind of grounds me if I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? And then gives me a little bit more clarity going forward too. But yeah, to answer your question in long and short, I felt very lost a number of times, but always managed to have found my way back. So
that point about walking is actually really interesting because it just made me think that we only have a couple of times We only have a couple of types of meditation, and it's usually sitting in silence or walking. You don't how you can't really, you can kind of get into flow state when doing other things like work or sports or whatever, but the only non-moving meditation we have really is a walking meditation.
Yep.
And even more powerfully when you're in nature.
Yep, I think so too. So yeah, to anyone listening, if you're feeling like you're in a bit of a rut, I know it sounds really simple, go outside. We're in the UK, so pick your days, because some days it'll make it worse.
Oh, it's been so hard recently. It's been like four degrees consistently, so it's been
I'm from Helsinki, man. I'm not going to complain.
Oh, it was like a snowstorm out there.
Yeah, to the people of Helsinki, beautiful city, you lot are suffering. That is like 4 hours of cold heat and like no sunshine. And I'm talking like daylight.
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours. But wonderful city, wonderful people.
There you go, nice. Has it also been challenging? Like you said, it's a lot of work, and suddenly everyone's looking at you, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
maybe not. How are you handling it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw on the topic of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg posted something maybe a few months back. It was really solid advice. You're never as bad as they say you are when you're down, and you're never as good as they say you are when you're up. It was the other way around. But anyway, I think he led it with, you're never as good as they say you are when you're up, and you're never as bad as they say you are when you're down. So when people are like, oh man, I was doing amazing, I'm like, yeah, we're doing okay. And then when people are like, oh, like what's going on here and there? It's like, yeah, things are going okay. Because business does that, right? And people often at times, if they check in here, they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then the next month they're like, oh wait, you're over here. I think just continue, as long as the overall trajectory is up, because you're going to wave, right? You're going to oscillate as you continue to go upwards. As long as the overall trend is up, try and minimize the variance in those oscillations. But as you trend upwards, that's the number one priority. How am I feeling with more and more people? It's weird. I'm by no means, I used to consider myself quite like a niche, but going to expos and stuff and having people saying, you're Danny. And I'm like, yeah, we met somewhere. But I'll say that, oh no, we met here. And they're like, we've never met, bro. I know you from what you do. And I'm like, oh, cool. And it's great. It's humbling to an extent, because by no means am I somebody who I think is notable.
Yeah, you've got niche micro fame. And people
I'm sure I'd use the word fame.
And it's a very nano fame, maybe even taking like the influencer words. And, if you post things on LinkedIn and someone who you don't know as a result comes and says hi to you because they feel like they know you, even if it's a little bit, that is micro fame or nano fame.
Yeah, it is definitely very interesting. And I remember the first time, this is a few years ago now, but I was invited to speak. So I lecture now sometimes at like a university here and there. And I remember I got approached, and I'm actually teaching another course. It's more like on applied entrepreneurship, but within the immersive world. When they first approached me, they're like, Dami, we're looking at like industry experts. I was like, okay, cool. Like, who can I connect you with? They're like, no, you. And I thought about it, and I think at that point I was in the industry for about 6 years and growing and VC backed. So I'm like, oh yeah, if I was to look at what criteria there is, I'm like, okay, and it's a fairly new technology. So okay, that's quite interesting, and I do appreciate that. And it's an adjustment, but I don't let it affect how I think. One of my mentors, a friend of mine as well, but also investor, Miles Jacobson, I'm the studio director behind Sports Interactive, the Football Manager game series. Just said one of the biggest advice pieces you can say is don't believe your own hype at all. If they say, oh, you're doing amazing, like, yeah, we're doing okay. Doing all right. Because at some point we're not going to be. And then we'll be doing well again. Like,
yeah.
It's just, if you let that get to you too much, when it starts to do this, I've seen founders panic because they're like, oh, people have this opinion of me, and I'm like, you need to just rein it in, focus on your team, focus on what you're doing.
Yes.
And everything else will come. And if people are like, you're doing amazing, like kind of let it, like, say thank you, be grateful, but then also kind of let it wash over you a little bit, so it doesn't because that can also put a lot of pressure and expectation on you as well.
It starts as gratitude and enjoying the recognition, and very quickly escalates into an egoic attachment to a concept of who you are. What I have achieved, what people have said about me, that is now who I am, and I have to hold on to it. And it becomes this like gratuitous, ugly version of the truth.
Yeah.
Because it can turn 180 and rear its head. I almost imagine it a bit like a multi-headed monster. You don't know which head it is, kind of, yeah. You don't know which head is which. Imagine you had no idea which head is. Actually, Cerberus is good because it's got 3 heads. So this is why I love this saying. And I teach it sometimes to entrepreneurs when I'm running more like mindset type workshops, where I'll ask this question and I'll say, who are you? People usually have their concept. And I said, what if I told you that there are 3 yous at any one time? Have you ever heard this concept before? There being
ego, superego, and the id.
No, actually. I don't know if I'd call this 3 versions, but anyway, what I go through is any one time there is who you think you are, who others think you are, and who you think others think you are.
Oh, cool.
Because there is, so this is what you say, who you actually are. How do you know who you actually are?
It's true.
There is only who you think you are. There is who others think you are, so there's that perception, and then you will have an assumption of how others perceive you. And all 3 of those things can exist. How can you objectively measure which one is the truth or is the closest to the truth? Maybe some amalgamation of the 3, and like maybe that's the goal, but really what this is outlining is don't be so attached to who you think you are, because there's a good chance someone else thinks otherwise. But also, don't care too much about how others think you are, because you can't know, because you're filtering it through what you think they think. And so it just becomes this big mess. And I wonder if the antidote to that messing you up is to just stay down to earth by asking yourself the right questions, or by having this perspective you've outlined of, no, it's going okay. And
one of my closest friends, so it's a really good point. One of my closest friends was really funny. This was like, I think just post-pandemic, or no, pre-pandemic, just before we went into it. It was 2020. So I've been running for about 4 years at this point. It's pre-funding, but we'd had the evening stand-up pieces, the Progress 1000 power list, like all this stuff. So things are starting to tick up. We'd appeared on like BBC, etc., and like we were starting to get like lots of traction. And this childhood friend of mine, at that point, we'd known each other for about 15 years, now close to 20. And I remember we were having like drinks at his place, a lot of us, and he was like, Dami, so what do you actually do? And I loved it. I laughed. Because it was, for me, that friendship was like, doesn't really care, right? And not in a bad way, but it's more, I know that the reason why these people are friends with me is because of who they think I am outside of anything that I'm doing professionally.
Yes.
In fact, I think the thought of all of us, whenever we think about like us at work, we laugh because it's like, it's taking you seriously at your door. But I guess we've known each other since we were like 11 years old, right? So for us, it's when I think of like one of my friends, like on a client call or whatever, I'm like, okay, we're doing really well at our job, but it's also kind of like, if we were to look at each other, it's still like childish, like this guy presenting.
Who are you again?
Like trying to be all professional, all this stuff. But so those kind of things also help you keep very grounded as well, because they remind you of who they like began to love as a friend and like grew up with as a friend. And when you start hearing people describing you or talking to you about being X, Y, and Z, yeah, that's great in my professional life. But if you can almost see professional you and personal you as different, and professional you is maybe like an add-on to you, but not part of your core being, I think that's really important.
My friends have a similar running joke where they're like, we don't know what you do. And then at a party or something, a bunch of people just get together, especially if there's new people or people that we don't know. And they'll just stalk my LinkedIn and they're like, no, we still don't get it. It's like, would you? And it's just is the way it is. Like, you are doing non-typical stuff. And it's really nice to know that there are some people that just don't care about that, because what you do is not who you are. Yeah. We can fall into the trap of making it who we are.
Yeah, I've seen it firsthand.